Middle Path Radio, your number one online Islamic talk station.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Middle Path Radio. Thank you for joining us here at Straight Talk. I'm your host, Kamal Hussein. Due to Maghrib Salah, we have started a little bit late than our usual time, which is 9 p.m. So apologies if you have been waiting. Tonight in the studio, we have our regular faces, Brother Khairul Islam and Brother Abdul Samad. Abdul Samad, who doesn't really need an introduction, he's known for speaking his mind. Yeah. So thank you, brothers, for coming in.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Brother Kamal, how are you?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Nice to have you back.
It's always a pleasure
to
speak to you.
Good stuff. Look, you guys need to speak your mind, because this show is about being frank, and we want to have a frank and engaging discussion, inshallah. You can call or text us. Our number is 074 77080 or you can tweet us at Middle Path Radio. You can listen to this show from our website, which is straight-talk.co.uk, featuring all our previous shows, which you can listen online or download as podcasts. So please check it out and join in with this discussion tonight. Moving on to tonight's topic. When you think about poverty, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Well, for me, it's the third world countries. For example, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and most of the African countries. Some of us can personally identify relatives who are very poor, who don't know where the next meal will come from. We find children young as 8 or 9 working to support their families. And many of our families in UK here are continuously supporting families, friends, and even villages. Yeah, and this is poverty. This is how I understand poverty, right? Well, did you know in UK a report by the Parliamentary Inquiry was done entitled Feeding Britain. It described a growing demand of emergency food assistance amongst the UK population. According to the report, 4 million people in the country are at risk of going hungry. Subhanallah. And 500,000 children live in families that cannot afford to feed them. And 3.5 million adults cannot afford to eat properly. And this is the state of UK today. And this is what we want to look at tonight. Please call us and share your thoughts and even your experience of poverty or knowing people who are living in poverty. What's your thoughts? 074 77080 Let me start with Brother Khairul. How do you see poverty in UK? I mean, what's your take on this?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. You mentioned 4 million. I think that's all data, by the way. The poverty, the statistics shows, the increase in number of people that are going to these food banks, for example. But this is just a start. The food bank, a lot of people don't go to these food banks because of, shame, and they rather, live without a meal than go to these food banks. Also, these food banks, you'd have to get approval from the council for you to be able to go into the food banks. You can't just go in.
Okay.
So you have to be approved person. So a lot of the people they suffer in silence.
Wow.
You mentioned 4 million. That was Joseph Rowntree, I think, in 2010. They did that report. Recent report on The Guardian on the 6th of May, 2016. That's very recent. Yeah.
Wow.
They reported more than 8 million people in UK struggle to put food on the plate.
So in 4 years, it's increased so much. Double, really.
It's more or less doubled.
Wow.
And we're talking about they going without a meal every day. Or every other day they're not having a meal. So it is staggering figures, but this is the reality of Britain today.
You don't look at Britain. When you gave these figures, someone could easily say this is Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Africa.
That's right. It's not. It's right here. And what's talking is that there's so much money and richness in this country as well. There's no shortage
isn't it?
of wealth here. Yet, I mean, not only this is putting money on, people are going homeless. During 2010, 2011, 2009, 2010, these were, if you like, the austerity period. Yeah, we thought that, that's the time. But between then and now, the number of people that's become homeless is amazing, staggering as well. 2009, 2010, 54,000 were registered homeless.
Wow.
And then in 2014, 2015, over 112,000 reported homeless.
Just homeless.
These are staggering figures, and that's constantly increasing. If you look at, I mean, those people that suffer the most are mainly the elders and the youngsters. But
the elders, they do have elderly homes and stuff. They're not on the street. We don't see many elderly couples on the street, do we?
No,
we do see the youngsters. And is it because of the housing that they can't get council housing?
Well,
or social
they're
housing?
they're not on the streets. But if you look at the fuel poverty, for example, it is reported that during the winter months, more than 20,000 people, elders, die because of fuel poverty.
Wow.
These are staggering figures. This is what's happening and underlying within our society. So these are very, very important figures that we need to look at.
Abdul Samad, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, when you actually mentioned this topic, I thought, where is this poverty? And I thought, is this really a relevant subject? But then when I started to look into some of these statistics and some of these, when I started to research some of this, I was shocked. And to be quite honest, I felt, how did I feel? I felt really bad, that, this is the sad reality. When I looked at some of these statistics, honestly speaking, sometimes, I just felt like crying at some point, especially, I mean, like there's a teachers union that done a sort of like survey. And the sort of things that they said is like, there are pupils coming into school hungry, and
children coming into school hungry.
Yes, and a lot of these families are unable to sort of like even provide food. So the teachers will give assistance, out of their own pockets.
What do you think? What do you think the families? Especially
a lot of these pupils, they say basically there's nobody there in the morning at home.
Is it because the families are working, because the parents are working?
And the parents are trying to make ends meet. They're trying to, work. They're doing double shift and so on and so forth. And this is the sad reality. But, I'm guessing it's probably, most of it is probably up north, maybe not so much in London. But that's my guess, You
say that, Samad. In London, the number of homeless, sorry, we're talking about the homeless, but, the people sleeping rough on the streets, staggering every year, year on year, there's an increase. So last year...
Is it because of the shortage of...
Sorry, having said that, actually, my son came and reported to me once that there's a child that was in his class, and he would come in and... at lunchtimes, he would open up his box and there's only like a slice of cake or something so sort of like,
it's not really lunch.
Not a meal. It's not exactly a meal, and he would look at it and...
Snacks, and almost.
And my son would actually offer some of his food to him. And I said, I told him that it's really great that he's doing that. And within a week or so, that child wasn't there anymore.
Do you think social service...
Maybe the social services picked him up, or, my son doesn't seem to know what happened. But yeah, so having said that, yeah, there are these incidents. And there are loads of other sort of like, thing that this report has come up with. And it's really sad,
That's the report by the teachers union,
teachers union, yeah.
Okay.
And more than 3,250 teachers responded to this, actually, and they're giving some really sad realities, and they're blaming a lot of this on government policies and because the teachers, they actually experience this. They deal with the reality, they deal with the children, they deal with families, and they have a better sensation of the reality on the ground, unlike the government and the politicians and so on. So for them, they've raised this concern. Even some medical professionals have also raised this issue quite seriously, because what they're saying is that a lot of people, a lot of adults even are coming in who are malnutritioned, meaning that they're not having enough of the right food. So that they're coming in for treatment because they lack a lot of the nutrients that is very much needed.
I mean, related to that,
I want to go back because you talked about homeless. I mean, can you just go into a bit more? What's your research and what did you find?
So, in London, we have rough sleepers. They have increased over time. So, in 2010, there was about 6,000 people rough sleeping, kind of like, and then that steadily has increased over time. So you've got about over 7,500 that are rough sleeping. So these people don't even have a place for the night. So
wow.
And then the other ones I wanted to bring in is Brother Samad talked about the young people. I was talking about the olders. So you've got elderly over 65s who are not looked after, and it's crazy, staggering figures. You've got Center for Economics and Business. They reported that over 1 million over 65s are malnutritioned, as a result of they can't even buy the basic foods because they have to pay for the fuel. They have to pay for the gas, and they have to pay for the electricity.
But doesn't the government help? I mean, obviously, you have a welfare system here. State provides you if you don't have work, especially when you're old. Obviously, you have the pension and you have some. Doesn't that cover? I mean,
well, it doesn't cover actually, because if you actually look at the, for example, the fuel prices and its increase, it's gone through the roof. Fuel prices are very, very expensive. And really, so people are faced with a choice whether to,
use the heater or use the gas.
Pay the fuel bills or put food on the table. Do you see? And these are very difficult choices a lot of people are making. Actually,
thinking about that
on this topic, actually, I bumped into this guy a couple of weeks back, and he came to me and he said, "Can you help me out?" And he's asking for a bit of money. And
well, you get that.
No, and you know what he said?
You have to really be careful with it.
No, you know what he said? He said, you know what it is? I haven't even got any fuel. I just got I got a flat, but I haven't even got any fuel, and I haven't ate since yesterday. And he didn't look like he's in a very good condition.
Did you buy him food, or did you just give him money?
Well, I just gave him a tenner, because that's what he asked for.
The number of meters where you have to actually put the money in, they're constantly increasing. More and more people have to get those meters because the fuel companies, they want to get their money up front before they can give the fuel. And you see that even with the neighbors. Sometimes they will say, can you lend me £2 because my meters run out? I haven't got any electricity.
But is it because unemployment? I mean, what are the factors? What is causing this? Is it unemployment? Is it taxation? Is it the debt? What is it?
I think that there are many factors. I mean, the austerity. I mean, the government has cut back on a lot of the benefits, welfare benefits, and a lot of these have been sort of like abrupt, sudden cuts. In payout, and a lot of people, they are just suddenly out of pocket. And this austerity thing, like after the bailing out of the banks and things like this, there's been a lot of pressure on these families where they were really depending on a lot, the monies that was coming in, and suddenly it's just not there. What do they do?
Well, there's so many factors. I mean, one of the factors Brother Samad has highlighted. I mean, cost of living is definitely increasing, whether inflation shows it or not.
We can feel the pinch, isn't it?
And the income is going down. I mean, if you look at the last 5 years, most of the income people was frozen. It wasn't even inflation. And then there's the increase in the food prices. There's also, you can say, there's huge wastage as well. It's amazing the amount of wastage that is produced, where these could have easily been sold to people at a slightly less price, but the supermarkets.
So talking about wastage, when I was a student and I worked for Tesco, every day, end of every day, we used to throw out a lot of the food because they were out of date, but they were perfectly fine. I remember I was thinking, wow, these are fine. You could have that for another 3 days if you refrigerate.
Well,
those.
According to government statistics, 400 million meals are just wasted and thrown away each year. So staggering figures. This is according to the government. But the increase in rent, private rent, even on public rent, there's an increase in social housing rent as well, because they want to be at the same level as private rent. All of those things has a huge effect on the income that somebody has to be able to provide for food. So you find, I work with schools as well, and when you speak to people, this is common where children do come with malnutrition, and
they don't have a proper breakfast. Really,
they haven't had a proper breakfast. When you speak to the parents, they are doing day shift, night shift, either to pay the rent because the rent is so high, or if they have a mortgage, then the mortgage is because the prices have increased so much. Everyone wants to be on this property ladder, and they commit themselves to huge amount of mortgage, where both the husband and the wife both working still to pay, and it's a continuous thing that they have to pay the mortgage, otherwise they lose the house. They have to pay the rent, or they lose the house. So before they get their money, before they get the money on their hand, it's all gone.
Before it comes to your bank,
that's right. Most of it is gone. So
I wanted to go back to Abdul Samad. I think you made a point about the bills, like gas bills and electric bills and stuff that you need to pay out. When I was in Bangladesh, you had another option, isn't it? You could burn something else. You could burn like wood. So you had some people that they had gas. They were the privileged ones that they could afford it. Even if you did not have electricity, you could actually use alternative method. Here you can't do that. You can't. You can't just chop up a tree and burn that for fuel. You can't do that. You see, so who's better off? I don't know. I mean, what I want to ask you, Brother Khairul, is what are the real effect of people who are poverty stricken? What are the real effect? I mean, what is the effect, lasting effect that it leaves?
Yeah, just before that, if you have a look at in society, there is this staggering difference. So there's those people who've got huge amount of money. And John Lewis recently reported about their women's handbag. And they said the average person that comes to their shop, in their handbag, they've got about £1,200.
Cash.
They've estimated it in terms of the iPhones, the iPads, the makeups.
Well, the handbags are about £400.
The handbags are about £400. So you have these people, and at the same time you have people like the BP executive recently. For 1 year on a contract, he was given £13.8 million. For 1 year, the chairman of BP.
For doing what?
Or managing BP. It's staggering. So it's not, you can see.
Raising the price, you mean?
So part of the these are the things, this consumerist culture where there is constant effort to try and get these are the role models, if you like. You want to get that, and this is part of the cause of why people trying to live beyond their means, even what they can't afford. So as a result of that, they suffer in terms of food and so on. So you find some people, the rise in food banks, over a million people has been reported this year. You find a lot of those people, they're not like they haven't got a shelter or they haven't got a job. They've got a job which pays them lots of money. But the problem is, like we talked about, they have to pay their mortgage or they have to pay their rent. And this is what causes them to become in food poverty.
Are they living by their means? I mean, you find that some people are not working, but they've got all the luxury. They have the phone, they have these, and you talked about the designer clothing and all that stuff. So, do they not put it on themselves? I mean, is it...
Well, I think it's the culture that is inbuilt within society.
Yeah.
That is the problem. Going back to your question, which is
what
are the
effects? I mean, what effects does it have?
Well, the effects, you can see the effects that, those people, they will live on the fish and chips, for example, which will result in them becoming overweight and malnutritioned in certain ways. They will it will lead to the parents going out to work day and night to try and survive. As a result of that, the children are not looked after properly, and then they're going into drugs. They're becoming homeless. They're becoming prostitutes, and the easy target for the grooming gangs, if you like. Yeah? All of those things leads to stress in the family,
So
suicide rate.
drugs,
I think
Suicide, the increase in suicide rate. On top of that, if you look at how these people are vilified, I don't know if you remember last year you had Channel 4 showing the benefit street.
Well, they've got that they had how to get a council flat, and you realize that it's the whole system. You have to know how to work the system, or you're completely done. You see. I have a question here. I have a text here I'm going to read out. It says, I find it very hard to understand how people in the UK are in poverty. Why do they not get jobs? Or where's their family? I'm quite shocked. That's the first text. The second one is said, what are the type of government policies that are responsible for this common hardships, especially of the children? Some may say that those people on poverty actually are on drugs or on alcohol habits. What's your thought? These are two texts. I mean, yeah.
I mean, first of all, I mean, you're talking about the effects, especially. I think the young are especially vulnerable, especially when they're not looked after, and their behavior and their morale in school and generally, is very low, and they tend to underachieve. They become marginalized, and these are the things that then lead to behavioral issues, and other things, like drugs and truanting school and these sort of things. So yes, it has a massive effect because the society sort of like marginalizes and sidelines them, from a full participation in society, and these are the effects. So, and I think this is where it's very serious, that we consider and we think about these things.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago there was a government report out in relation to this, and if you look at the children that are looked after, they are the people who are not achieving GCSEs even. They're not coming out with proper English and mathematics for them to be able to provide or live their lives.
If they've got problems at home, if they are not eating properly, if they don't have a decent meal, the education is the last thing. It's the same with the third world countries. Well, you find young children as 8 years old are working to support the family.
I mean, the government policies is amazing. I mean, if you look at the whole child care that they provide, they would rather the mother go and work and earn money rather than even looking after their own children. Who's better looking after their children? Is it the person that's being paid to look after the children, or the mother who has born them and has the best interest at heart at them? So I think all of those policies are quite twisted actually.
Okay, so are there people, organizations actively working to change the situation? I mean, are there organizations who are obviously we see a lot of the media highlighting something.
There's a wonderful story in the press recently, and they talked about Oldham. There's an organization. It's a food bank.
Okay.
Which is not like the ones where you have to, get referred to, but rather it's an open house policy they have. And this Muslim guy and his wife, they initiated this project where they, in the beginning, they found it very difficult to set up because there wasn't much support
Well, from the government or from
no,
the
not from the
community?
government, from the community. Even though people felt for it and they agreed because they liked the idea, but
Yeah.
what he approached a lot of the mosques, and I think there's about 38. It reported 38 mosques in Oldham, and none of the mosques actually took it on, and they had their reasons. And
Took the idea on or?
Yeah, to sort of like
volunteer to
facilitate and be a part of the project.
Okay.
They declined for their reasons because when you have this sort of thing, all sorts of people will come into the mosque and so on and so forth, and it will be difficult, for maybe their facilities and their their venue. Okay. But in the end, there's a church that sort of like came together with this couple, and they set this thing up, and what it's done, it's actually brought the community together, and there was all sorts of people coming together. And and this person actually walks, God knows how many miles, I can't remember. He walks for many miles to actually arrive at the center so that
just
he can get his food. No, not to help out, to just get his food. And he said basically he doesn't have a choice. This is one of his options. That either he does that because otherwise he doesn't get referred by, the council or anything like that. So, and this is where his problem is. So
the people in organizations that are working are mainly charities because people do feel, they can actually see these kind of things happening. So you've got a fair share.
Who should really, take this responsibility on?
Well, people who are doing it are these charities, really, like
should they be doing this?
But really, the government, they're tackling on the peripheries. What they are doing is, I mean, if you look at what they've done with the benefit, the universal credit, that's amazing because again.
When you mean by amazing, do you mean it's a good thing?
No,
or do you mean it's a bad thing?
Actually,
it causes huge problems.
Actually, we need to look at the attitude first of the government. Now, if you look at the attitude. We find
you can cut in whenever you like. We don't have a problem.
We love our brother Abdul Samad. He cuts me in all the time. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, a lot of these politicians, they've actually blamed the people. They actually blame those people who are going to these food banks and things like this. What they're saying is that these are people that are not willing to work. There's even one minister who said it's because they don't know how to cook.
They don't know how to cook.
I'm telling you, her name is Jenkins, something Jenkins.
Okay.
And these are the sort of comments that are coming from the policymakers. Now, can you imagine what sort of attitude they actually have towards these people? How despised these people are to these
But the thing is, no one is accounting the government. Where is it? I mean, why isn't there uproar?
Look, the government put this universal credit in place, and they said that everyone has to be reassessed for work. I'm talking about those who are disabled. After there was about 20,000 people, after they've been reassessed to work, they died.
What?
These people, they died after being reassessed to be able to go to work.
Well, I was shocked, or is it just because they didn't have their benefits? Wow.
No, it's just I don't know what the cause is exactly, but these are the figures that are coming out.
Wow. So, do you think the government views this seriously? And
I think the government, like I was saying, government is trying to tackle it on its peripheries. They haven't pinpointed the problem. The problem is this consumerist culture, the increase in terms of food prices and so on. And it's not that these people, they don't want to work or they don't want to be able to afford to, but they haven't been given the real chance. Now the people that see the problem and actually working are the general people who have created food banks like Brother Samad was saying, and other, there's also there's another one that I was looking at, which was like Fair Share. What they do is they go to Tesco's and Sainsbury's and they collect food that are out of date but still edible, and they distributed last year 17.1 million meals.
But my question is, can charities truly change? I mean, can they really change?
They can't. The charities,
because there are so many charities.
Charities can't. So you have Alison Graham, chief executive of the Child Poverty Action Group. Now, she said no one should be able to be be unable to feed themselves or their children in Britain today. We have 8.4 million people unable to eat properly. Shows the urgency of tackling the problem. Yeah. Now, this problem is not a charity problem. It's a problem within the system, systemic problem that needs to be tackled. Because if you look at some of the causes of, the house shortage, you have a lot of people, elders, they're living by themselves, where individuals, the children don't feel that they can live with their parents because they want their freedom.
Yeah.
So these are if you look at underlying causes, you need to look at those kind of causes. Why is it that everyone wants to live by themselves, causing a housing crisis? As a result, the rents increase. As a result, people have to pay more money for those kind of things.
What's wrong with having your own place and having that freedom?
Well, if you look at the family is the best. A lot of the times, if you have taken the responsibility at a state level and everyone's individuals, then it's a very big task for the state to actually to actually manage.
Actually, one of the reasons why maybe it's not so much felt in the Muslim community is actually because some of the social attitudes, some of the values that we have within the community, which is, for example, we live in family units and we value these things. We look after our relatives. We feel it's an obligation.
Okay, can I? I've got a text. I think this is relevant to what we are discussing now. And it says, do you think the government is irresponsible for not taking this matter into their own hands? And this is from Taha Hussein and Noshin Hussein.
I think it's very difficult for the government to admit this problem. So that's why they work in the peripheries, because it's very systemic. That means you have to say, look, there's something wrong with the system. There's something wrong with the way we organize our life in terms of a capitalist nation, and maybe we need to address underlying factors, but which they don't want to do, because what that means is big businesses, big.
So are you saying the government does not care about these realities?
Government.
Well, I would say the government doesn't care actually.
Because I think that's the text. He said, look, why do they not take this on their hands and take this responsibility? This is the text from Taha and Noshin Hussein.
Yeah, I would say that the government actually doesn't care, and it's a part of the whole social philosophy, where they actually see poor people as a problem, or people who are idle, people who are not working as a problem, and this is where
they're they call them scroungers.
So when Carol,
if they don't want to get
when Carol mentioned about Benefit Street, what is that doing? It's actually trying to portray the most vulnerable, the poor people of this society in a particular light, where they are disliked or they are seen to be a problem. They are seen to be the ones that are burdening our society. And that's the whole philosophy. And this philosophy is not new. It actually goes back. And there's history behind it. And if anybody studied economics, for example, they will have come across Thomas Malthus. And there's this whole philosophy, social philosophy about the Malthusian theory. And
can you explain that?
Yeah, I'll try to. I'll try to.
I think this theory needs to be explained.
This whole theory is that the world, the resources of this world is scarce, it's limited, and it can only cater for a certain number of people.
But that's true, though, isn't it?
Well, it's not true, actually.
Okay,
it's not true, and some of their predictions that they put across is that we're going to face human catastrophe, a disaster from overpopulation, and they had given certain dates, and we've gone way past those dates and nothing has happened. Okay. And this whole theory, social philosophy, is about the poor people are a burden, a problem upon society. Population control needs to be looked at and actively pursued. Population control.
It's a bit like China, what they're doing, or
it's not exactly like China. What they believed is so they looked at wars as a very positive thing. this whole theory looks at wars as a positive
bit more
thing.
communist, socialist?
No, it's not socialist actually. It's very capitalist.
Okay.
And they looked at, for example, they thought the poor people should be restricted from marriage, and producing further generations of more poor people.
Okay.
They looked at plagues, diseases as a good thing because it takes out the weak and the unfit people from the society, and it relieves us of this burden. And this
idea is very, very problematic, Brother Samad. If you think about it, it's survival of the fittest. It's like in the jungle. We've got a bit of a...
Is that the case though? Is it survival of the fittest?
The question is, when we talk about capitalism, sorry, can I
we'll let you finish.
When we talk about capitalism, we need to understand that there are these social philosophies and economic theories and ideas that have actually evolved to then come out with this system of capitalism. And at the heart of it is these ideas that have been adopted by the elites of our society and the policymakers of the society. And this is actually how they view this whole thing. So when we look at Benefit Street, this is actually what it is. This is what they're portraying. This is what they're showing. This is what they're saying. Do you understand? So I wouldn't be surprised if they actually actively went out to war just to maintain the population control. You understand?
Interesting thought. Brother Khairuli wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think what's happened is the capitalist system, what it does is the division between the poor and the rich continuously increases. And these are the results that we're seeing. And it doesn't matter whether there's a downturn or an upturn. It's still those who have money, they become more richer and richer. And those who are poorer, they become poorer and poorer. And I think as government, if they serious...
Why is that?
Why is that? Because it allows the system just allows. It's just designed that way. The capitalist system is designed so that those who have money can increase. It's to do with the banks. It's to do with how lending works. It's to do with debt and so
taxation
on. And taxation.
Okay.
All of those kind of things have got to play a part.
So the poor can never really lift their head.
That's right.
Well, look how the government responded, isn't it? When we had the economic crisis, we found the government was able to churn out trillions of dollars to bail out these big multinational corporations in emergency. But it doesn't see...
After a year, they took a big fat bonus as well.
But these governments don't see that millions of people who are in poverty, who are unable to put food on their table, as an emergency. What does that show in terms of attitude? What does that show in terms of what you really care about and how you view society?
But even this money is a debt for the population. So every one of us are paying back
that's
this
right.
money.
We've all paid for it.
If these big banks are failing, the government is ready to step in and take the money from the average.
But they have their own
blogs,
arguments though, isn't it? I mean, if the bank fails, your pension fails, your bonds and all of that stuff that you've invested, that goes down the drain. So really what they're saying is they're protecting our assets. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, at the same time paying them £13 million for a year in bonuses.
Can I read out a quote by Adam Smith? It's quite interesting. Yeah, civil government, so far as it is instituted for security of property, is in reality instituted for the defense of the rich against the poor, or of those who have some property against those who have none at all. So if you understand, this is exactly what the government is doing. It's actually protecting the rich against the poor. This is what it's doing.
Okay, all right, that's interesting. Let me. I want to look at poverty in the Muslim community here in the UK. I mean, is there poverty in the Muslim community here in UK, or do you think that it's slowly creeping in? I mean, you did touch on it, Abdul Samad. You did say that. Look, why that the Muslim community is not facing the pinch
as much. The Muslim community is not facing the pinch as much is because of some of our values of family, of charity, of helping. Feeling the obligation to help our brothers, relatives.
When you talk about family, what do you mean? Family what?
First of all, I mean, one of the
do
things
they all live together?
They all tend to live together. In extended families. I mean, so parents, 3 generations live together. You know, this is quite common. But living in the UK, it is a lot more difficult because of the way the housing and stuff is organized.
Look, in Islam, we've got a concept called Sirat al-Rahim, which basically talks about how you have a relationship with your relatives. So your relatives know you, and you know your relatives. And this is how, if you look in a British society, a general person, they have nowhere to go when they haven't got any money. So they are going to these food banks and so on. But with the Muslim families, in a general case, they still carry some of the Islamic values that they used to carry back home. Most of them immigrants, so they did have some Islamic values. And when they haven't got food to put in the plate, they still got that relative that they can go to, and they're giving them, whether it's their brother or their cousin or the auntie, it doesn't matter. They have a close-knit community where they help each other.
Interesting. I mean, I introduced this subject, and I was talking about Bangladesh in particular, and I know that some of my family members, they support our relatives in the village. So you'll find that within the village, if there's like 4 or 5 families that are abroad, you will find that they support the whole village in terms. So whenever there's an issues, if there's a marriage issue, they'll come and say, look, my daughter or my son needs to get married. Can you help us out? And you'll find that the whole family gets together and they send money.
In places like Bangladesh, there isn't a welfare system. In this country, there is a welfare system, yet still there are people in poverty. It just doesn't make sense. In Bangladesh, they are very, very poor. There isn't a welfare system, but people are more or less, generally happy in that sense. They're content.
And that's something I want you guys to discuss. Contentment.
There's the issue of content. But in terms of creeping in, we need to just go back to that question in terms of creeping in. Recently, in the last 10-15 years, you can see this kind of issues that the wider society faces is creeping into the Muslim community, because the children that have been brought up, they haven't been brought up, if you like, the culture that their mothers and fathers have had. They've had obviously the culture that's prevalent within the British society. As a result, the individualistic mentality and the consumeristic mentality, where they see their parents as a burden, or the brother who may not be able to get that good job as a burden. Why should I help him? I've got to have my holiday, I've got to have my big house and my big car, and I need to have the latest iPhone. I haven't got time for him. This is the mentality that is prevalent, if you like, and as a result of that, this is creeping in. So you find a lot of where it was frowned upon to put your mothers and fathers when they're old into old people's homes. Well, but this is happening.
Yeah, this is happening. I mean, there is old people home on Shunali Gardens, which is in Shadwell. There's full of Bengali, Pakistani, Indians, uncle and aunties.
But 10 years ago, this would be seen strange. This couldn't happen.
One of the things is that one of the reasons why this society has evolved towards individualism is actually at the heart of it is their philosophy about society, when they actually see everybody as individuals. So we see, as Muslims, we see communities, we see families, we see as fundamental structures of a society. Whereas the belief that has been adopted and institutionalized within the establishment here is actually the individual. The individual is free to do what they want to do, and the state is geared up for that individual. Does that make sense? So if you look at like a child is not responsible for the parent, and the state will guarantee that the state will take the responsibility for that elderly, think about this.
but
Think about
do
it.
you think
Can I
it's-
just
yeah.
finish? The state takes the responsibility for that elderly and doesn't hold the child responsible in any way. Yeah. Now, what is the long-term consequence of this attitude and mentality? So now you're talking about some Asians are now going into old people's homes and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I know. I know. I deal with a lot of people in the community, and I know they. Recently, what's happened is the council is funding a lot of these old people's visits and things like this, where they look after, they change. The bins, and they do their shopping and whatnot. But these people, they have children. They have children that
are working.
That are even probably living with them, but have no responsibility or are not taking that responsibility.
Why is that?
Because the state is providing. Why should they bother?
But don't they have the moral duty as Islamic, if it's Muslims or tradition? I mean, even if you go back to non-Muslims who are from the third world countries, they have a certain
what I'm
tradition,
saying is,
isn't it?
the point is, over time, it develops into a mentality where a child is no longer responsible.
But my point is, look, there are parents, when their children get to the age of 18, they tell them to leave. So really, do you not think it's the mentality? We can't just go and blame the government and say, look,
I'm not just blaming
but
the
government.
government.
What I'm saying is basically, it's a mentality. It's a liberal mentality.
The point is this society actually sees everybody as individuals. That's how society is viewed, as individuals.
But
the system that is in place is what Brother Samad is saying. Everyone's individual, so the family unit isn't there. Although some people do realize in the importance of family unit. For example, John Major, he mentioned about back to basics. His mentioning of a back to basics was about the family unit, and that's important. But the problem is when you make it individuals, the government is not able to look after the citizens in a way, and even it hasn't got the appetite because it's really controlled by the capitalist mentality. I was mentioning the work about the figures about the people dying after being assessed ready for work. The statistics was revealed by Work and Pensions Department, so the government department, and what they said was that in the period of 2011 to February 2014, 2,380 people died after their claim for employment and support allowance ended because work capability assessment found they were fit to work. Now, the point isn't, they died, something happened, what's happened. The point is, if you look at the mentality of the government, it's not designed to look after the poor. Otherwise, how comes these people, because the whole thing is to, they see them as scroungers and you need to, get rid of them. That's the whole thing.
But,
I
do you think there are some scroungers there?
But let there be. Well, my question is...
The problem, this is where what we're talking about, the Islamic answer to this is really, it's the family unit. You don't even... welfare system is far beyond. If the family was a proper family unit where, there's so many things. For example, debt. Debt is a huge problem in this country. It's a cause of stress. It's the single most cause for suicides amongst the middle-aged. And then, within the Islamic system, we're talking about, living within your means. So it's not important to have that, that thing that you cannot afford. But so these are the things where the government can tackle.
So debt and housing and all of these are recipe for disaster.
All are recipe for disaster. The amount of money that is required to look after the elders, because because of individualism, because the son or the daughter is not interested, because they need to enjoy themselves, they need to go to the nightclubs, they need to be able to be at work because they want to go up the ladder in their career or get the next house.
But that's not the case with everyone, though. I mean, I know
this is a predominant culture.
I know, like my next door neighbor, she looked after her mother, and she was old herself. So you can see that there are those people. And what you've said, right. I think that's the important point you've made is that, look, I think it's changing because of, if you look at the elderly people that were there, they had this maybe Christian culture where they felt that, there's moral obligation to look after your parents. Maybe that's changing, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, this is the predominant culture I'm talking about. You know,
Okay.
obviously, those who do, you know, they are under tremendous pressure. I mean, Allah has provided love within us for our parents. So you know, it's very difficult. Obviously, you know, people. This is the thing. It also causes depression as well. So those people, you know, who are looking after their parents, for example, you know, there's huge depression within them as well because they feel like they've wasted their life. Some people.
So my question is, how we actually coming, you know, where there's so much to discuss. I don't know.
There's so much, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, how does Islam view poverty, and how would it solve the issue of poverty? How would it solve the issue of poverty?
Well, actually, there's a saying: society is measured by how the weakest of its members are treated. And if you look at Islam from day dot, it came to address these issues of poverty, of how to treat the vulnerable, the orphans, the weak, the destitute.
And I mean,
And the Quran,
many verses.
There are many
in the
verses
Quran.
and so you can see how the compassionate Islam is and was towards the weakest of the society, and that's the sort of society it built. And unlike what we see, you know, the richest, wealthiest nations of the world are struggling to feed their poor, or even care for those people, or even look at them sympathetically. Rather, they are portraying an image of these people as an evil that has befallen the society, kind of. Do you see? And that's the saddest part of it.
Yeah.
You know, where these people are almost non-human.
Yeah.
I think like I was saying earlier, it's a systemic problem, and they need to address the problem within the system. So if you look at the problem,
root of the problem, you're saying is the system.
It's a very systemic problem. So if you look at the problem that if we continuously produce, it will trickle down, and those people who cannot afford, they'll get something. Yeah, it's an issue of production. So we need to produce more and more and more. The problem is that does not address those people who have, you know, huge dumps that they burn their food because they don't want to sell it for cheap.
Yeah.
Or the, you know, big bank balances that are, you know, put away, and hoarding and so on. It doesn't address any of this. Whereas Islam, what it talks about is it talks about on a basis of distribution, that the problem of economics is distribution, that you have to
fair distribution.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the system should really be one where that everyone is able to get their basic needs, and then beyond that they can get their luxuries. And that's those luxuries is not a problem. We're not. I'm not talking about people, you know, living in a communist kind of state where
everyone gets the same wages.
Same wages and same things. I'm not talking about that. Far from it. But the thing is, we need to look after those people who need it most, and they need to be. And the way to do it is go back, look at the Islamic values, and for the Muslim community, it's very, very important for them to realize the system that Allah has given us, the family unit that He's given us, it protects us from all of these things. The issues of debt that we're talking about. You know, there's so much drive to actually get these the interest-based mortgages and so on. Let's not go that direction. If we go that direction, then we will face these kind of problems that we're talking about right here, right now. You can, even though we have huge amount of wealth, huge amount of riches, there are people who are suffering.
Wow. Abdul Samad, I want to, maybe you touched on that, you know, the initial stage of the message, the revelation. And you said, look, it was always the looking after the poor or the vulnerable or the slaves, yeah? How the Quran actually came to address this. I mean, what's your thought on this? I mean, you wanted to maybe discuss a bit more on that.
If you actually look at the society or the thing that we're discussing today about poverty in the West, you could maybe even compare it to the situation that they had in Mecca at the time, where the powerful elites hoarded money. They mistreated the poor.
Enslaved a lot of the
people. There wasn't distribution of wealth, wasn't taking place. All sorts of problems. Islam came and it sought to change this. It was a revolutionary idea that was going to overturn this whole system, whole philosophy, whole attitude. And in Islam, subhanAllah, we have this today.
Yeah.
The problems we're seeing today is not new. And the solution is not
New.
The solution is tried and tested. It's worked in the past and it can work again today. What I'm saying is here, with the establishment of Islam as a system, we found poverty was actually eradicated within a period of 40 years, 30, 40 years. At the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, we all know this story actually.
Mm-hmm.
When the Khalifa ordered the wali to distribute the wealth amongst the poor, i.e. the zakat, they distributed and then they wrote back, they said, we distributed to all the people that are eligible for this thing and we still have a lot of money left in the treasury. Then then he was ordered, find those people who have any debts and clear off their debts for them. And they did that, and then they came back and they wrote back saying, we did that, and then we still have a lot of money left in the treasury. I think it went to a point where they said, if there's anybody who wasn't able to get married because they didn't have enough money, then pay them to get married. Can you imagine? And that was in those day and age where we didn't have...
Well, they didn't have a production line.
They didn't have a production line. They didn't have machinery and all the rest of it, all the technology to go with it. But even then, they were able to. It's because of the system, and it's because of the attitude. And I think Muslims, we need to revise our philosophy in Islam and our attitude and how we actually view society itself. Because I think there's a lot of
there's a nice story about this. You talked about Bangladesh, and I go to Bangladesh every now and then. It's amazing the hospitality you get, and how it's like they're
humble.
Give you humble. They give you everything, and then you go
they
into
don't
their
have
house.
much.
They haven't got anything. All they've got is a bench to sleep on, and that's it. And even then, they will bring out everything and to give you, and they're so you just see contentment there. So people can be content with very little.
I think that's a very interesting point you've made, because it's the contentment that's what the issue is here, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Look, I believe that it is actually living by your means. Yeah, and this is where you linked with debt, and he said, look, debt is a major thing. And we know in Islam that interest and debt, these are things that, interest is haram anyway, but debt is not liked. It's something that is, you shouldn't go into.
That's
right. Yeah, unless you're, so that's very important, I think. Going back to what you talked about Omar bin Abdul Aziz. What about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I mean, he did face a lot of the issues that, in terms of initially,
Well, look at the very beginning of Islam, when the Muhajirun, they migrated to Medina, and they came with nothing. Yeah. They left their properties, they left their money, they came with absolutely nothing. What did Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He actually had to deal with the crisis at hand. The day one was a day of crisis.
And he didn't have charity organizations.
There wasn't charity organization. Yeah. There was nothing. So what did he do? What Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam done was he teamed one of the Muhajirin with one of the Ansar to live together, and the responsibility was upon the Ansar to provide everything that is required, that is needed for this person. And that is how they dealt with this situation. And then after, when situation got better, then they were told that now they have to, take their own responsibility.
But I think, that's a very nice point and a beautiful point you've made. And you find that generosity, that's something even in Ramadan is coming. And we find these charity groups every night, all the TV stations, Islamic TV stations or your Asian TV station, it's whole night they are raising money. And, subhanAllah, they raise up to millions. And it's amazing what the ummah, we're so charitable.
That's
We're
right.
so
It's
charitable.
within our culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
But
there's so much.
I'm seeing that this is something that we're losing because of what you've just said. You know, that these liberal values are creeping in, and
these liberal values that we're talking about is having a big balance, having the show off mentality where I've got a bigger property than yours, or a bigger car than yours, or more beautiful. Yeah, mine was a sports car, yours isn't. And this mentality obviously is creeping in within the Muslims, because this is part of the capitalist mentality, the capitalist psyche. And as a result of that, you find the elders, those who are carry the older culture, they are the ones who are giving charity in huge numbers, not the youngsters. But within Islam, there's so much encouragement in terms of giving charity. One
of the things that has been understood very well by the philosophy of capitalism is that spend. When you spend, you generate more economic activity and so on. And you find that in Islam, there's this concept where Allah says you spend. وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا. Spend from what I have given you of halal. Yeah.
What you have, what Allah has
exactly.
given you,
and
not
so,
what you don't have.
So being stingy actually doesn't do good. Being stingy doesn't do good for yourself, doesn't do good for the society. So spend in the good cause.
Yeah.
You see, and that was the attitude.
Well, hoarding is haram in Islam.
Exactly.
Yeah, so for you to create,
I think we'll have to do
allowed.
another show on Islamic economics, and you know what? We've actually run out of time. I've been told by the producer, look, we need to finish. So inshallah, look, this is a very interesting subject, and I think we can talk for another hour, really.
Anytime.
Anytime. So look. Jazakallah khair for you brothers coming down and discussing and doing your research. It's amazing, and I think we should all think about this Ramadan. Look, are we linking our actions to Islam, and how do we move on, and how to protect ourselves from this debt and this culture of wanting more. So inshallah, I think we want to end here. Sorry, I know Abdul Samad wants to come in, but we have run out of time. We have had a very interesting discussion tonight. So jazakallah khair, brothers. I would like to thank both of you brothers for coming down. And a special thanks to all our listeners for listening and contributing to the show. I really appreciate your comments and questions. Please join in next week. We will discuss Ramadan, inshallah. Again, my apologies. I did have a lot of text, but some of the text was basically irrelevant because we've discussed that in the beginning, so I didn't want to entertain that. So my apologies for not reading out those texts, inshallah. Again, you can follow us on Twitter, which is at Middle Path Radio, and continue with the discussion. I think this is a very important discussion. Maybe if you have, you can actually text or let us know what are your thoughts, really. So Straight Talk is streamed live on the internet, so you can listen to us via YouTube, and you've got Mixler every Thursday 9 p.m. Or you can go to our Straight Talk website, which is straight-talk.co.uk, and listen to us from there. You can also download any of our previous shows that you may have missed. Again, thank you for listening to Middle Path Radio. I hope you have a nice evening. See you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Middle Path Radio, your number one online Islamic talk station.